helicopter spun through the blizzard, its rotors screaming against the wind. Metal groaned. Sparks exploded from the cockpit. Victoria Hale gripped the seat, blood streaming down her temple, and screamed into the chaos. "Leave me! The pilot's gone. There's no one left to save." Through the shattered window, a figure appeared in the snow, broad-shouldered, moving fast. Ethan Ward didn't hesitate. He tore through the wreckage, smoke choking his lungs, flames licking at his jacket. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice raw. He pulled her from the burning frame, wrapped his body around hers as the fuel tank ignited. The explosion lit up the mountainside like a second Sunday. Heat and light consumed everything. White light swallowed the world. Metal shrieked. The snow turned orange. And then silence. Complete, absolute silence. 2 days earlier, Seattle woke under a blanket of frost. Ethan Ward stood in the doorway of a small wooden house on the edge of St. Haven, watching his daughter zip up her coat. Lily was 8 years old, with tangled blonde hair and her mother's eyes. She held a model helicopter in her hand, the kind sold in toy stores, not the kind that once flew missions over war zones. "Did you really fly this high, Dad?" she asked, tilting the toy toward the sky. Ethan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Once. Now I just fly in memory." He drove her to school in an old pickup truck that rattled over icy roads. The radio played classic rock. Lily hummed along, her breath fogging the window. At the gate, she turned back. "You'll pick me up, right?" Ethan nodded. "Always." He worked as a radar technician at St. Haven Air Traffic Control, a job that kept him grounded in every sense of the word. The station sat on a hill overlooking the valley, surrounded by pine trees and silence. Inside, the walls were lined with monitors, each one tracking flights across the northern corridor. Ethan's desk was cluttered with coffee mugs and old flight logs. On the corner sat a framed photo. Him, Lily, and a woman with dark hair and a soft smile. His wife. Dead 10 years. He didn't talk about her. Not to his coworkers. Not to Lily. Not even to himself, most days. But she was there, in every decision he made, every late-night shift he volunteered for, every time he refused to get back in the cockpit. Flying had been his life once. He'd been one of the best rescue pilots in the Pacific Northwest, trained to navigate storms that grounded everyone else. But that was before the crash, before the loss, before everything changed. That afternoon, his supervisor leaned into the break room. "Ward, you hear about tomorrow? Hale Aviation's doing a test flight. Big demo for the press. Their new X9 model." Ethan's hand froze on his coffee cup. "Hale?" The supervisor nodded. "Yeah. CEO's flying with the pilot herself. Gutsy move, if you ask me." Ethan said nothing. He stared at the steam rising from his mug, his jaw tight. The name Hale hadn't crossed his path in years. He'd made sure of it, buried it, tried to forget it. But hearing it now brought everything back, the anger, the grief, the betrayal. That evening, he signed up for the overnight shift. "Just want to make sure the radar doesn't glitch again," he told his supervisor. But the truth was simpler and darker. He needed to see it. He needed to know if history was about to repeat itself. Victoria Hale was 32 years old, and she looked like someone who had never failed at anything. She stood in the hangar at dawn, her tailored coat spotless against the gray concrete, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Around her, engineers ran final checks on the X9, a gleaming helicopter with experimental rotors and a navigation system her father had designed before he died. The press was already gathering outside. Investors were watching from New York. This flight wasn't just a test. It was a legacy. It was proof that James Hale's vision hadn't died with him. "Miss Hale, you don't have to do this," her lead engineer said quietly. "We can send Marcus alone." Victoria shook her head. "If I'm asking people to trust this machine, I need to trust it myself." She climbed into the co-pilot seat. Marcus, the pilot, gave her a thumbs up. The rotors began to spin. The helicopter lifted off the ground, rising into the gray morning sky. At the control tower, Ethan watched the screen. The X9 signal appeared as a blinking dot, climbing steadily into the mountains. For 20 minutes, everything was normal. The signal was strong. The flight path was clean. Then the dot flickered. Red warnings flashed across the monitor. Ethan leaned forward, his pulse quickening. Tower to hail X9. Do you copy? Static. Hail X9. Respond. The signal vanished. Ethan didn't think. He grabbed his jacket, ran to his truck, and drove into the storm. The snow was blinding. Ethan's windshield wipers fought against the ice, his headlights cutting weak tunnels through the white. He followed the coordinates burned into his memory from the radar, his hands gripping the wheel so hard his knuckles went pale. When he saw the wreckage, his chest tightened. The helicopter was on its side. Rotors bent. Smoke pouring from the engine. Flames crept along the fuselage. He didn't see the pilot, but through the cracked window, he saw her, Victoria Hale, slumped against the seat, blood on her face, her eyes half open. The snow was thick. Ethan could barely see 10 feet ahead. He ran toward the wreckage, his boots sinking into the drifts. The heat from the fire hit him first, then the smoke. He shielded his face with his arm and pushed forward. Through the shattered cockpit window, he saw her clearly now. She looked at him, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Then she screamed, "Leave me. The pilot's gone. There's no one left to save." Ethan didn't answer. He tore open the door, unclipped her harness, and dragged her out just as the fuel tank caught fire. The explosion threw them both into the snow. Ethan covered her body with his, felt the heat roll over them like a wave. When the flames died down, he lifted her into his arms and carried her into the forest. His lungs burned. His hands were numb, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. The cabin was small, tucked between two hills and surrounded by evergreens. Ethan kicked the door open, laid Victoria on the couch near the fireplace, and wrapped her in every blanket he could find. Her breathing was shallow. Her skin was cold. He cleaned the blood from her forehead, bandaged the gash above her eyebrow, and checked her ribs for breaks. She didn't wake. The fire crackled. Outside, the storm howled. Ethan sat in a chair across from her, his hands shaking, and stared at the woman he'd just saved. He didn't know who she was. Not yet. But something about her face sharp, determined, even in unconsciousness, reminded him of someone. Someone he'd spent 10 years trying to forget. He stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the snow. The wreckage was out there somewhere, buried under white. And with it, answers he wasn't sure he wanted to find. Around midnight, Lily appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. She was supposed to be asleep in the back room, where Ethan had left her with a book and a flashlight. "Dad?" she whispered. "Who's that?" Ethan exhaled. "Someone who got lost. Go back to bed, sweetheart." But Lily didn't move. She walked over to the couch, looked down at Victoria, and tilted her head. "She looks like an angel who fell asleep." Ethan's throat tightened. "Maybe she is." Lily fetched another blanket from her room and tucked it around Victoria's shoulders. Then she climbed into her father's lap and fell asleep. Ethan held her, his eyes on the woman breathing softly by the fire, and wondered what he'd just done. Victoria woke to the smell of wood, smoke, and coffee. Her head throbbed. Her ribs ached. She opened her eyes and saw rough wooden beams, a stone fireplace, and a man sitting across from her with a mug in his hands. He was maybe 40, with graying brown hair, a scar along his jaw, and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. "Where am I?" she croaked. "Safe," Ethan said. "Storm's too thick to call anyone tonight. I'll get you help in the morning." Victoria tried to sit up, winced, and fell back. "Who are you?" "Just someone who was in the right place." She looked around. The cabin was modest weathered furniture. Old maps pinned to the walls. A framed photo of a man, a little girl, and a woman who wasn't there anymore. "You saved my life," Victoria said quietly. Ethan didn't answer. He handed her a glass of water. "Drink. You're dehydrated." She took it, her hands trembling. "The pilot Marcus, is he?" "I didn't see anyone else." Victoria's face crumpled. Ethan looked away. Outside, through the thick curtain of snow, a pair of headlights moved slowly along the ridge. Someone was searching. Not for survivors, for something else. In the morning, the storm had passed. A search and rescue team arrived at dawn, following the coordinates Ethan had radioed in. They loaded Victoria onto a stretcher, wrapped her in thermal blankets, and escorted her to a waiting helicopter. Reporters were already gathering at the base of the mountain. Ethan stayed behind. Standing in the doorway of his cabin, watching the helicopter disappear into the gray sky. Lily tugged his sleeve. "Is she going to be okay?" Ethan nodded. "I think so." Inside, the TV was on. Lily sat on the floor, eating cereal, her eyes glued to the screen. The news anchor's voice filled the room. Breaking news. Victoria Hale, CEO of Hale Aviation, has survived a catastrophic helicopter crash in the northern mountains. Authorities are calling it a miracle. Ethan froze. The camera cut to footage of Victoria being carried on a stretcher. Her face pale, but alive. The anchor continued. "Miss Hale is the daughter of the late James Hale, founder of Hale Dynamics, whose helicopters revolutionized emergency transport in the early 2000s. Ethan's coffee mug slipped from his hand. It shattered on the floor. Lily looked up. "Dad?" But Ethan wasn't listening. He was staring at the screen, at the woman he'd just saved, and the name that had haunted him for a decade. Hale. 10 years ago, Ethan Ward had been a rescue pilot, the best in his unit. He'd flown into hurricanes, wildfires, war zones. He'd saved hundreds of lives. And then, on a cold November night, he'd lost the only one that mattered. His wife, Sarah, had been aboard a medical transport helicopter, a Hale Dynamics model, when it went down over the northern ridge. Mechanical failure, the report said. Navigation error. No survivors. Ethan had flown the search himself. He'd found the wreckage. He'd found her body. And in the weeks that followed, he'd found something else. Proof that the navigation system in that helicopter had a known defect. A defect that Hale Dynamics had covered up. James Hale himself had signed off on the safety reports, even after engineers flagged the issue. Ethan had tried to go public, but Hale's lawyers buried him in paperwork. The FAA closed the case, and Ethan, broken, furious, drowning in grief, walked away from flying forever. He'd sworn never to touch another helicopter, never to let another Hale machine take someone he loved. He'd kept that promise for 10 years, until yesterday. Now, standing in his cabin, staring at the TV, Ethan felt the old rage flicker back to life. He walked outside, into the snow, and retraced his steps to the crash site. The wreckage was still there, half buried in ice. The search team had removed the pilot's body, but they'd left the rest. Ethan knelt in the snow, pulling aside twisted metal, until he found what he was looking for: a charred circuit board, blackened but intact, with the Hale Aviation logo stamped into the corner. He turned it over in his hands. His breath came in short bursts. It was the same system, the same flaw, the same design that killed Sarah. He tucked the board into his jacket and walked back to the cabin. Inside, Lily was watching cartoons. Ethan sat beside her, put his arm around her, and whispered, "History doesn't get to repeat itself. Not this time." He looked at the circuit board again. The metal was cold in his hands. Sarah's face flashed in his mind. Her smile, her laugh, the way she'd kissed Lily goodnight. And now, this woman, Victoria Hale, the daughter of the man who'd killed his wife. He'd saved her. And he didn't know if that made him a fool or a saint. That night, he pulled out an old file box from under his bed. Inside were newspaper clippings, accident reports, correspondence with lawyers. He hadn't looked at these in years. But now, he needed them. He needed to remember why he'd stopped flying, why he'd walked away, and why, despite everything, he couldn't let another person die. 3 days later, Victoria Hale returned. She arrived at the St. Haven control tower in the early afternoon, dressed in a gray coat and dark jeans, her face still bruised but steady. She asked for Ethan Ward at the front desk. The receptionist called him down. When he stepped into the lobby, Victoria stood. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "I wanted to thank you," she said finally. "For what you did." Ethan nodded. "You're welcome. I don't even know your name." "Ethan." She extended her hand. He shook it, his grip firm but brief. Victoria studied him. There was something in his eyes, something distant, guarded. "You've flown before, haven't you?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Once. Why'd you stop?" "Because I had to." She didn't push. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "If you ever need work, call me. I owe you more than I can repay." Ethan took the card. It was embossed with the Hale Aviation logo. He stared at it for a long time. When he looked up, Victoria was already walking toward the door. "Miss Hale," he called. She turned. "Why were you flying that day?" Victoria's expression flickered something between pride and sadness. "Because someone has to believe in what we build." Ethan watched her leave. Then he looked down at the card in his hand. And the photograph on his desk, the one of Sarah, smiling, holding Lily as a baby. His hands were shaking. He wanted to tear the card in half. He wanted to call her back and tell her everything about Sarah, about the cover-up, about the man her father really was. But he did neither. He slipped the card into his pocket and went back to work. That night, he couldn't sleep. The warmth of the fire couldn't chase away the cold inside him. He sat at the kitchen table, the circuit board in front of him, and thought about Victoria's words. Someone has to believe in what we build. But what if what they built was broken? What if belief wasn't enough? He thought about calling her, about warning her, about telling her that the helicopter she'd flown in, the one that nearly killed her, was flawed at its core. But would she believe him? Would she listen? Or would she do what her father did? Bury the truth to protect the legacy? At midnight, he made his decision. He would find proof, undeniable proof, and he would give her a choice, to be like her father or to be better. He pulled on his jacket and drove back to the crash site one more time. The moon was full, casting silver light over the snow. Ethan climbed through the wreckage until he found the black box, half melted and covered in frost. It took him an hour to pry it loose. The metal was stubborn, fused by heat and ice. But he worked methodically, carefully, until it came free. Back at the cabin, he connected it to his laptop and began extracting the data. The files were corrupted, but enough survived. He cross-referenced the flight logs with the records from Sarah's crash. The navigation error was identical. The same malfunction. The same ignored warning. The same signature at the bottom of the safety report. James Hale. Ethan sat back, his chest tight. If he released this, Hale Aviation would collapse. Victoria would lose everything: the company, the legacy, the empire her father built. But if he stayed silent, more people would die. More families would be destroyed. More wives. More daughters. His hands hovered over the keyboard. He could send this to the FAA right now. End it. But something stopped him. Victoria's face. The way she'd looked at him in the cabin. The way she'd said someone has to believe. She didn't know. She couldn't have known. Her father had hidden this from everyone. Even his own daughter. His phone buzzed. Unknown number, he answered. A distorted voice spoke. "Don't open that box, Mr. Ward. Not if you want your daughter to stay safe." The line went dead. Ethan looked at Lily, asleep in the next room, and felt his blood run cold. He walked to her door, pushed it open slightly, and watched her breathe. She was curled up under her blankets, clutching a stuffed bear. Safe. For now. Ethan closed the door and walked back to the kitchen. The black box sat on the table, its secrets exposed. He could destroy it. Pretend he'd never found it. Keep Lily safe. Walk away like he did 10 years ago. Or he could do what Sarah would have wanted. What was right? He picked up his phone and typed a message to Victoria Hale. We need to talk. Tomorrow. Your office. He hit send before he could change his mind. Then he sat down at the table, his head in his hands, and waited for morning. Outside, the wind picked up. Snow began to fall again. And somewhere in the darkness, someone was watching. Ethan stood and walked to the window. He scanned the tree line. Nothing. But the feeling didn't go away. He double-checked the locks. He looked in on Lily again. Then he sat in the living room, the circuit board in his lap, and didn't sleep. By dawn, he'd made copies of everything. The flight logs, the safety reports, the black box data. He stored them in 3 different locations, one at the cabin, one at the control tower, one with his lawyer. If something happened to him, the truth would still come out. He kissed Lily goodbye, told her he'd be back by dinner, and drove to Seattle. Ethan walked into the Hale Aviation headquarters at noon, a glass tower in downtown Seattle, all steel and ambition. He rode the elevator to the top floor and walked past the receptionist without a word. Victoria's office was all glass and steel, overlooking the city. She looked up from her desk, startled. Ethan? He didn't sit. He pulled the circuit board from his jacket and dropped it on her desk. The charred metal landed with a dull thud. You need to see this. Victoria stared at the piece. What is it? Proof that your father's helicopters killed my wife. The room went silent. Victoria's face went pale. Ethan's voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. 10 years ago, a Hale Dynamics helicopter went down. Navigation failure. My wife was on board. Your father signed off on the safety report, even though he knew the system was flawed. Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. That's not possible. It's in the records, and it's happening again. He pointed to the circuit board. Same flaw. Same system. Your X9 wasn't sabotaged. It was built broken. Victoria picked up the board, her fingers trembling. She opened her laptop, pulled up the engineering files, and started cross-referencing. Minutes passed. Her face grew tighter with every line she read. The office was silent, except for the hum of the computer and the sound of her breathing. Finally, she looked up. Tears were streaming down her face. Oh my God. Ethan said nothing. He just stood there, watching her world fall apart. Victoria stood, gripping the edge of her desk. I didn't know. I swear. I didn't know. Your father did. He's dead. But his mistakes aren't. She looked at him, her voice breaking. What do you want me to do? Ethan leaned forward. You reopen the investigation. You pull every helicopter with that system. And you tell the truth. Victoria wiped her eyes. If I do that, this company dies. If you don't, more people do. She nodded slowly, her jaw set. Then I'll do it. The weight of the moment hung between them. Victoria sat down, her hands shaking, and began typing. Emails to the FAA, to the NTSB, to every regulatory body she could think of. Ethan watched her, his chest tight, knowing that this woman, the daughter of the man he hated most, was about to destroy everything her father had built, and she was doing it because it was right. Because it mattered. Because lives were worth more than legacy. Why are you doing this? Ethan asked quietly. Victoria looked up, tears still on her face. Because you were right. Someone has to believe. But belief without truth is just a lie. Before either of them could speak again, an alarm blared from Ethan's phone. He looked at the screen. A distress signal. A pilot. Missing in the northern ridge, the same area where Victoria had crashed. Ethan's stomach dropped. Another X9? Victoria checked her tablet. Her face went white. Test flight. Solo pilot. He took off an hour ago. Ethan looked at her. We have to go. Victoria nodded. I know. They ran to the elevator together. In the car, neither of them spoke. The weight of what they were about to do pressed down on them both. Ethan gripped the steering wheel. His knuckles white. Victoria stared out the window, her jaw set. When they reached the airfield, chaos greeted them. Engineers were shouting. Radios crackled with static. The storm was building again, darker and faster than before. And somewhere in those mountains, a man was dying. Just like Sarah had died, just like Marcus had died. History repeating itself. Over and over. Until someone stopped it. No one at the airfield would volunteer. The storm was too heavy. The winds too strong. Victoria begged them. Offered money. Offered bonuses. Offered anything. But the pilots shook their heads. It's suicide, one said. No one's getting through that. Another pilot crossed his arms. I've got a family, Miss Hale. I'm not dying for a test flight. Ethan stood by his truck, staring at the mountains. The peaks were disappearing into the clouds. Snow was already falling. Lily's voice echoed in his head. You'll pick me up, right? He pulled out his phone and called her. She answered on the first ring. Dad? Hey, sweetheart. I need to tell you something. Are you okay? I'm fine. But I have to go fly. Lily was quiet for a moment. Like you used to? Yeah. Like I used to. Is it dangerous? Ethan closed his eyes. He thought about lying, but he'd never lied to Lily. Not once. A little. Then why are you going? He looked at the mountains. Then at Victoria, standing by the hangar. Her face pale with fear, because it's the right thing to do. Lily's voice was soft. Then do it, Dad. Do the right thing. Ethan hung up. He walked to the hangar. Victoria ran over. You don't have to do this. Yeah, I do. Then I'm coming with you. Ethan stared at her. That's insane. You saved my life. If I'm going to live with that, I'm going to earn it. She climbed into the co-pilot seat before he could argue. Ethan started the engine. The rotors spun. The helicopter lifted into the storm. The wind was worse than Ethan remembered. The helicopter shook, the controls fighting him with every gust. Snow blurred the windshield. The wipers couldn't keep up. Victoria gripped the armrest, her knuckles white. How do you know where to go? She shouted over the noise. I don't, Ethan said. I'm following instinct. They flew deeper into the mountains, following the last known coordinates. The pilot's signal was weak, flickering on and off like a dying heartbeat. The storm battered them from all sides. Ice formed on the windshield faster than the defroster could melt it. Then they saw it, a crumpled helicopter, wedged into a narrow canyon. Its rotors snapped like broken bones. Smoke rose from the wreckage. Ethan brought them down as close as he dared. The wind howled. The engine groaned. Ice was already forming on the rotors. There, Victoria said, pointing. The pilot was slumped against a rock, barely conscious. Blood stained the snow around him. His flight suit was torn. His face was pale. Ethan lowered the rescue line. Victoria clipped herself in without hesitation. What are you doing? Ethan demanded. Getting him. Before he could stop her, she dropped out of the helicopter. The wind swung her like a pendulum. She spun, her body twisting in the gale. But she held on. She reached the pilot, clipped the harness around him, and signaled Ethan. He started the winch. The line pulled, but the weight was too much. The engine choked. More ice formed on the rotors. The helicopter tilted dangerously. The altitude gauge dropped. "We're too heavy," Ethan shouted. Victoria looked up at him through the snow. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with understanding. And then she said the words that brought everything full circle. The words that echoed across 10 years. "Leave me." Ethan's blood ran cold. The world slowed. He saw Sarah's face. He saw the wreckage. He saw Lily, 8 years old, asking if he'd pick her up. "No. Save him. I'll wait for the next team." "There is no next team." The helicopter tilted further. The engine sputtered. The altitude dropped faster. Ethan looked down at Victoria, hanging in the wind, and made his choice. He locked the controls, clipped himself into a safety line, and dropped down beside her. "What are you doing?" Victoria screamed. "Not leaving you," Ethan said. His voice was steady, certain, final. He pulled the pilot into his arms with one hand, wrapped his other arm around Victoria, and signaled the winch. The helicopter groaned under the weight. The rotors screamed. The line pulled them up, inch by agonizing inch. The wind tore at them. Ice broke free from the rotors in chunks. The engine choked, coughed, and somehow kept running. They cleared the canyon wall. The storm swallowed them completely. White light filled the sky. The helicopter spun. The controls failed. Metal shrieked. And then everything went silent. The world disappeared into white, and in that moment, suspended between earth and sky, Ethan felt peace. He'd done it. He'd stayed. He'd broken the cycle. History would not repeat itself. Not today. The search team found them at dawn. The helicopter had landed hard in a snowbank 2 miles from the crash site. Its rotors bent, its engine dead, but intact. The pilot was unconscious but breathing. Paramedics worked on him immediately, stabilizing his vitals, loading him onto a stretcher. He would live. Victoria had a broken wrist and a gash across her forehead that would need stitches. Blood matted her hair. Her coat was torn. But she was conscious, alert, already trying to stand. Ethan was unresponsive. His hand still gripped the safety line that had kept all 3 of them tethered. His breathing was shallow. His face was pale. They airlifted him to Seattle General. Lily sat by his bedside for a week, holding his hand, whispering stories. She told him about school, about her friends, about the new model helicopter she was building in the garage. She told him she loved him. She told him she was proud of him. She told him that Mom would be proud too. On the 8th day, Ethan opened his eyes. Lily burst into tears. "Dad!" He smiled, his voice hoarse. "Hey, sweetheart. You scared me. I scared myself." She hugged him, careful of the tubes and wires connecting him to machines. "You did the right thing, Dad." Ethan's throat tightened. He pulled her close. "Yeah, I did." A knock at the door. Victoria stepped inside, her arm in a sling. Her face bruised but steady. A white bandage covered the stitches on her forehead. "Can I come in?" Lily nodded. Victoria walked to the bedside. She set a folder on the table beside the flowers and get well cards. "I reopened the investigation. All of it. Your wife's crash. The X-9 system. Every helicopter my father ever signed off on." Ethan stared at her. "And? Your name's been cleared. The FAA's reopening Sarah's case with full authority. Hale Aviation is grounding every helicopter with that navigation system. We're issuing a complete recall, and I'm testifying. Publicly." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. For the first time in 10 years, he felt the weight lift. The anger, the grief, the guilt, all of it. Lighter now, not gone, but bearable. "Thank you." Victoria shook her head. "I should be thanking you. You didn't have to save me. Twice." Ethan looked at Lily, then back at Victoria. "Yeah, I did." Victoria smiled. But it was sad. bittersweet. I guess this is goodbye then. She turned to leave. Ethan's voice stopped her. Victoria. She looked back. Her eyes were red, tired, but clear. How many times do you think I owe you my life? Ethan smiled. It was tired. Real. I stopped counting. A month later, the snow melted. Spring crept into the mountains, turning the white hills green. Wildflowers bloomed where the wreckage had been, covering the scars left by fire and metal. St. Haven Airport unveiled a new hangar, dedicated to safer aviation practices and the memory of those lost to preventable accidents. In the center of the hangar sat a helicopter, gleaming and rebuilt from the ground up, with a revolutionary new navigation system designed by Ethan Ward himself. Its name was painted on the side in gold letters. Lily 1. Victoria stood at the podium before a crowd of reporters, engineers, families who'd lost loved ones to faulty Hale aircraft, and regulatory officials from Washington. This isn't just a helicopter, she said, her voice steady and clear. It's a promise that we'll never put profit over people again, that we'll honor those we've lost by doing better. By being better, my father made mistakes. Terrible mistakes, but I won't compound them by staying silent. This is our commitment to the future. The crowd applauded. Ethan and Lily sat in the front row. Lily tugged her father's sleeve, grinning. That's so cool, Dad. They named it after me. Ethan grinned back. Yeah, pretty cool. After the ceremony, Victoria found them outside, standing by the edge of the airfield, watching the sun set over the mountains. Want to see the view from the top? She asked. Ethan raised an eyebrow. The top of what? The mountain, where it all started. They hiked together, the three of them, to the ridge where Victoria's helicopter had crashed 3 months ago. The wreckage was gone now, cleared away and recycled. Only the meadow remained, soft and green, dotted with wildflowers. Lily ran ahead, laughing, chasing butterflies. Ethan and Victoria stood side by side, looking out over the valley. I used to think this place was cursed, Ethan said quietly. And now? Victoria asked. Now I think it's where I learned to stop running. Victoria reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver ring. Simple. Elegant. It was engraved with 2 words. Don't leave. She held it out to him, her hand trembling slightly. I told you to leave me once. I'm asking you to stay now. Ethan stared at the ring. His throat tightened. He thought about Sarah, about the years of grief and anger, about the bitterness that had consumed him. And then he thought about the woman standing beside him. The woman who'd chosen truth over legacy, who'd flown into a storm to save a stranger, who'd looked him in the eye and dismantled everything her father built because it was the right thing to do. Lily came running back, breathless and covered in grass stains. She saw the ring and gasped. Dad, is she proposing? Victoria laughed, tears streaming down her face. I guess I am. Ethan knelt down in the soft grass. He took Victoria's hand in his. I stayed in the fire. I stayed in the storm. I'll stay in your life. He slipped the ring onto her finger. Lily cheered, throwing her arms around both of them. The sun broke through the clouds, warming the ridge with golden light. The flowers swayed in the gentle breeze. Victoria leaned into Ethan, her head on his shoulder. Lily wrapped her arms around both of them, completing the circle. And in that moment, on the mountain where everything had fallen apart, they became whole. The wind was gentle now. The sky was clear and endless. And when the last traces of winter melted away, no one was left behind.